All right, so in this chapter, you guys are going to learn about what it's like after you're done with college and you go off and rent a place or buy a place, or after high school when you do that. So a couple of things you have to consider if you were to actually rent a place is that you have to think about all the hidden fees that aren't really necessarily expressly written directly in the beginning. They'll also tell you that they'll have to apply for and hand in a security deposit. And the security deposit is something that's refundable after you've owned the place for a while, just to make sure that you don't damage the place while you're living there. And when you're thinking about a place that you might look for, think about how much time you want to spend there. Do you want to be there for just like a 1 year, or do you want to have a longer agreement than that, or 5 years? Think about the distance that the place is from where you work or where you're going to school, other kinds of services that are in the area like supermarkets, dry cleaners, and places to walk and enjoy, going to a movie theater, and then thinking about the possibility of needing to do some repairs and maintenance. Usually when you rent, you don't have to worry about those things. If the dishwasher, for example, were to break, you can just call the landlord, but if you own the house, you are the one that's responsible. And people forget this, that whenever they're moving somewhere, it's going to cost them money. And so they really should think about the costs that are involved there. And usually it all relates to whether or not, you're going to have the movers, professional movers, or you're going to do it on your own. And you could do a combination of it. But the major things that happen with moving is you got to pack, you got to load, you got to transport, you got to unload, and you got to unpack. And professional movers will do all of that, but you can save money by doing some of it yourself. And just think about, how many things do you need to bring into your house? What kind of big pieces of furniture? And do you want to rely on your friends to do that, or is it too much and you need to actually get other people to help you out? Advantages, so we'll take a look at renting in particular. So the nice thing about renting is that it becomes more mobile. You can leave if you need to. It's very convenient because of that. You have fewer responsibilities when it comes to the upkeep of the place. And usually when you rent, you live in a more tightly dense community, so there's other people that you can become friends with in an apartment complex, and the month-to-month costs are usually lower. But the disadvantage is the fact that it could be noisy because you live in close proximity to other people, so therefore you also lose a lack of privacy, and usually those places are smaller. You have to find other places to store things. Sometimes they have places in the basement of an apartment building, but the storage in the apartment itself could be very limited, and then you also have to figure out the parking. It's not true for every place that you might rent from, but these are issues. But a lot of times when they're in more urban areas, you're going to run into an issue related to these things. And when you agree to this lease, you're going to sign a lease of some kind, and you will be the leasee and they will be the lessor, so the landlord versus tenant relationship. And usually you do it for about 6 months. You have other options of month to month, but usually it's at least 6 months or a year. And there are penalties for leaving before the end of the term of the lease. And if you don't want to stay beyond the lease, you can also tell them within a specified period of time that's usually outlined in the contract. And any kind of changes that are going to be made, they often require that they give you 30 days of written notice of those changes. You could do a month-to-month agreement. A month-to-month agreement would allow for you to stay in there for 1 month and then re-up your lease. Usually people do that if they're not really sure how long they're going to be in a particular area, and they're thinking that they're going to move constantly, or they're not sure what's going to happen, so they can move pretty quickly, whereas a 6-month lease or a year lease ties you in a little bit more. Usually what also happens with that is that they sometimes raise the rent periodically. So you have some obligations, and they have some obligations. The landlord has to make sure that it's a habitable place. So it's got to be weatherproof. It's got to have everything in good repair. If it's got an elevator, it has to continue to work. The locks have to work. You have to have potable water. But on the other hand, you have some things that you must do. You have to follow the contract. You have to pay on time. You need to know about what happens if you could potentially get evicted. and you have to keep everything in good condition as you had it from the beginning. Otherwise, you will risk being able to continue your lease or even to hold on to your deposit. And you do have to allow for your landlord to come into the place to inspect. And then if you don't follow those processes or you don't pay on time, they can evict you. And it's a very difficult thing to do often for them to do that, but it's usually, if they follow through on it, then it's going to create problems for you down the line in terms of your credit, and make it like your actual credit number score will be affected by the fact that you have had an eviction. So maybe you should think, if this is going to be something that you don't like renting, maybe you should consider buying a house.